Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Good evening, Robin. How are you doing?
I'm good. A little tired today. A little energies depleting at this moment in the evening, but I am excited.
Did you have an active day?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot. We did recording this morning, then I had clients, and then there was something else I fit in the middle. I was doing some research, and I just felt like not physically active, but mentally, I guess. How about you?
I'm tired today, but I think I've overdone it the last couple days. And luckily, our expert tonight, one that's been with us before, has more energy than both of us. So she will get us excited. And I know that's one of the gifts she has is when she works with students and families, they always say she's so energizing and so motivating that kids want to learn and want to engage. And so I'm excited to do this part two, Robin. We did part one, Making Differences, I want to say back in September.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right.
Back in September, and it was one of our most well-received episodes we've had.
Yes.
We've had parents calling in and requesting more. And, one big topic that families have asked us to really cover is really helping children become more engaged in school, as well as helping with those executive functioning skills that so many families are saying they feel like have gotten a little bit behind since the pandemic and everything. And so I know we spent some time during part one of Making Differences talking about ways to really support our children, both in school and at home, with school, feeling confident about school. And so I'm excited, Robin, to have Lauren come back and really continue the conversation and take it a little bit further just based on what she's seen. As a reminder, Lauren has years and years working in schools and hospital settings. She is executive functioning coach at the Learning Lab, a center she has founded and leads and has a lot of families that come and use her services. Also directs an education team at one of the large psychiatric hospitals in our area, working with students with emotional and behavioral issues. And so I'm just so excited, Robin, to have her tonight. Welcome, Lauren, back.
Welcome.
Hi, friends. It's good to be back.
Yes, we are excited. That did energize me today thinking about seeing you tonight. So thank you, Lauren.
Oh, thanks. Someone's got to keep us going, you know?
Yeah.
You guys get me going too. So it's always fun when we do this.
Yes, it is.
Well, and I know, Lauren, we were talking about the last episode, when students don't feel that they can be successful and when they don't feel confident that they are going to be able to succeed, so often you see that shutdown. They avoid, they don't want to do it. They might just, grab their phone or their video game, and helping them to believe in themselves is so key. What have you found works with motivating students and helping families in that way?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost thing is that you have to figure out why they're unmotivated. So if something's going on, and we say this a lot, like you got to figure out what the root is so that you can address it. That starts with meeting each child where they're at, because honestly, they'll tell you a lot if you're an active listener and you just give it space and time for them to get some things out to you. They'll actually tell you what's going on. And if they don't say it verbally, they're going to tell you with nonverbals too. So if you pay attention to that and make sure that you don't get into those communication traps of like leading questions and assuming that you know what the answer is or what's going on, that seems to help them be real with you back, I've found. And that transparency is huge for kids, of just being open and honest. I mean, even if you're having a bad day, you tell them you're having a bad day so that they feel comfortable telling you the same thing. And then from there, it gets kind of below that surface layer and you can kind of figure out what's going on because they start to open up. And then if they sense positivity from you, that is huge too. They are very used to getting yelled at or being nagged or feeling like they're not good enough in school, like you said, and like their grades are bad, things like that. So if you can be positive with them and show them that you're working towards a common goal so that they do believe in themselves and they can do it, and then show them the steps on how to get there, that's huge with them. Because a lot of times with motivation, it's because they just don't feel like they can succeed. And so when you show them like, hey, let's do this one part of this thing, and then they feel that success in it, that then catapults them forward and normally have pretty good success.
Yeah.
That is so true.
So true. I have people come and say, I just need to get motivated. I need to find motivation. And Lauren, I'm sure you get this. It's not finding the motivation. It's about that, potential to believe, the potential to improve, that ability and capability to accomplish. And once that starts getting stirred, then you start to see that motivation because they are starting to accomplish things. And then it just starts like almost a cycle effect. In this, how do you think parents can help reinforce?
Well, first of all, I think it needs to be positive. So I think a lot of parents are tired, are wearing multiple hats, have long days at work, and then they come home and then it's school time and things are going on. So if it is not in their ideal picture in their brain of how things should be, then it ends in like an argument with their kids, for example. So if you can stay away from that and the power struggle, I think that's gonna serve you well. That positive reinforcement, just like verbally and through action, showing them that you're proud of them, and they might mess up and it's okay if they failed something. And then how do they get through it? And how do you work together with your child to do that? That's huge. I mean, telling your kids you're proud of them, they're not used to that. Students will tell me all the time, clients will tell me all the time, like, mom is mad, my teachers hate me. Like, it's always negative. So I think it's that positivity over and over and over again, that repetition with consistency that really helps them hear it, because it makes them uncomfortable to hear. When I even tell a client or a student like, hey, I'm really proud of you, that was great, you can see them kind of like pull back a little bit until you do it enough times, and then they start to believe you, but it takes a long time for them to get there. So if you're a parent and you can do that more than harping on maybe the one negative thing that went wrong and try to find those pockets of positivity, that's huge. I always use the Oreo cookie analogy. I mean, I used to say it in teaching too, like when you give feedback to a student, you start with the positive, then you say what the opportunity is, and then you lead up with the positive, just like an Oreo cookie, but you want it all together because you don't want to eat it separately. So if you can think about that when you're a parent and try to use that as a visual, that should help too.
Well, and Lauren, I like how you said avoid the power struggle, right? Because one of the things we talk a lot with parents is if you're, texting excessively, do your homework. If you're nagging, if you're pointing out every time they've done something wrong, if you're yelling, arguing, bartering, threatening, that just leaves a child to feel frustrated and shut down, and they're going to avoid that interaction. I hear this from parents a lot. I tell them to do it 20 times and they don't listen. And I always say to parents, well, on the third time, why do you continue if it's not working? And they laugh, but you just sound like a broken record. And if it's not working, try different. I think we've talked about, but what are your feelings on students, benefiting more from positive praise versus that negative?
Yeah, I think it's huge. And mostly because they're not used to it. They are used to the negative. Like you just said, we all are. For some reason, it's in our nature to go that way automatically. So when you flip the script on them, they kind of don't know what to do at first, but it's also refreshing to hear that part of it. And like the pick me up every day, which sometimes that's all it takes. You and I have talked about this a lot with people, like teachers in schools, educators, of just like, say, hi, how are you? Use a student's name, actually check in with them, make a point to do it instead of being like, I'm so busy, I'm so tired, I don't have time. We can all say that about things, but that goes back into negativity. So if you can flip that and use the positive side of things, they just want to know that you're proud of them, across the board. And if you're an adult in a child's life, you have that opportunity to do it. So why not do it, right? It's kind of like we used to talk about with teaching. In the last episode, we talked about like how kids learn, and we differentiate and we do everything tailored to them. And then we're like, take the standardized tests. Like when we think about it, it's like if the child can't learn the way we're teaching, then maybe we should teach the way that they're learning. And that's to your point of what you just said. Like we have to go on their level and figure it out. And a lot of times it needs that positivity push behind it. Otherwise, no one's going to want to listen to you, whether you're a parent, a teacher, whatever you're doing in life. I know I would much rather listen to someone who's being upbeat and telling me what I can improve, but telling me that there's hope behind it rather than just yelling at me and nagging me.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And I like that, the pick me up. I think leading in with that and thinking that that's what I'm doing. We all are talking tonight about helping students believe in themselves. And that truly leads to the motivation. And I think parents really are seeking that. And I think they are truly trying to do it. And you'll hear them, well, I give them positive praise. And at the same time, and Jackie, you mentioned this earlier, right? Tired, you're exhausted, the nagging, the yelling, the reminding for times, right? And that's that negative reinforcement. Can you kind of explain why those are negative reinforcements for those students?
Well, they just sound negative, don't they? Number one. But yeah, so with negative reinforcement, you're either removing some unpleasant stimulus to increase some behavior that you want to see, or you're removing something that's pleasant to decrease a behavior. But either way, it's negative. So honestly, that's all they hear. And that's why it doesn't work all the time, because then you're back into the setting of my parents are yelling at me. No matter what, it just boils back down to the same thing. And it doesn't help them because honestly, there's no reward or incentive for that child to make a positive choice. And that's the biggest thing. It works much better if you're like, here's our common goal, let's get there. And then they make that choice and then they get the reward for it. And it doesn't have to be huge, it could literally just be positive praise. But I think parents fall back into it, like you're saying, because they really do think they're doing the right thing. But I've seen parents recently, there's a family I'm working with right now, and they try so hard on the positive side and it always falls back negative. But the best example is grounding, because this is for all age groups. You can remove your child's grounding period because they worked hard on their homework, but you could just let them work hard on their homework, keep them grounded because they probably needed that, and then do the positive reward for a job well done instead. And I think it's just hard. That's hard for parents to kind of balance that out and figure it out because it's not an easy thing, and we always just go back to kind of what we know. And it's not because we have ill intentions, but it's frustration, like you said, and it's long days and it's you want your child to do well and they're not. So then the frustration comes out in tone and voice of like, well, why can't you just do this thing? Well, sometimes they can't do the thing because they don't know how. And that's what I work with most families on of it's not that easy. They need it to be consistent. So if you do have structure and a plan that is positive, you need to follow through on it. And a lot of times the kids ask for it. And sometimes parents follow through and sometimes they don't. And it's funny when I have like the family sessions with it, I'm like, did you do any of the things we talked about last week? And you'll just see like the smiles come up and you're like, okay, we'll start again, So they wrap themselves out, but it's a learning experience for everyone involved, but it's good. It's good in the end. It just takes a lot of time and honestly motivation for the parents too, to keep themselves on that track so that they can keep the positive flair.
We talk a lot about when we are giving positive praise, we want it to be purposeful, right? We don't want it just to be, you're amazing. I love that you can be an NBA basketball player. Well, they probably won't be because they don't know how to even shoot a basket. But and when someone compliments you and it's not realistic, you don't necessarily feel better, right? You just feel like, wow, they don't have faith in me either. That's why they're pumping me up. And so you talk a lot about even praise being a little bit more specific, which I think is helpful too.
And that's a teaching thing that I learned when I was an English teacher with written feedback on papers. Number one was don't use a red pen because it already sets you in a negative tone. And number two, don't just say good job because that tells a child nothing. So I mean, if you think about it, unless a child knows exactly and specifically what they've done well, they can't duplicate it. They don't know how because they don't have the information to do it. So that's the first step. And it's hard. I think it's just really hard for kids to know where to go next. They need that feedback from the adults in their lives. And I know that you actually talked about that paper clips analogy the other day, but that's a really good one. So for those of you that don't know, it's about, educators or teachers or parents, anyone that can put a certain amount of paper clips in one pocket at the beginning of the day or the beginning of an hour, whatever you're doing, and switch them over every time you give that specific positive praise so that you know that you're doing it. And that's a sensory thing for people to keep track and to like hang in there with it. But it's a really good way to keep yourself true to it too and accountability because the kids need it, and honestly, the adults in your lives feel better when they do it too. And that's the thing I think people miss also. Like we talk so much about the kids, but the parents feel better and the educators feel better and social workers, whoever's doing it. When you walk out of a room and you're like, yeah, I just did that and I made a difference and it made an impact on these kids' lives.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of switch it. And this is one that I can remember this parent. It was a father. And what he said to me, okay, all this positive stuff is great, Robin. I'm really working hard on it. But what if we really need to correct this behavior? What if we need to have this to change? Do you have any suggestions? And do you do corrective feedback, neutral tones, expression, any of that?
All of that.
What would you say, instead of saying, stop that, don't quit, why would you do that, any of those, what would you say to help when you're trying to correct that behavior, especially when a child's pretty dysregulated?
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to wait till dysregulation phase is not at a peak, because if you try to correct it while the kid is dysregulated, you're not getting anywhere. Like no one's going to win that battle.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be timed right. And then I think it needs to feel like teamwork also in a family. And that's why when I do the executive functioning, I make a point to pull parents in sometimes, infrequently, frequently, depending on the kids, and literally like sit at the table and say, let's just talk about the skills we're trying to apply. Let's talk about things that are not going so well. Let's talk about things that we need to improve. Like you're saying, like, let's correct this behavior and what's going on. And you need to get the feedback from the child and the parents. You also have to get them to a place where they're open to talk about it. But luckily, I have pretty good luck with that. It's just a tone and delivery, I think, and how you ask questions so that it feels like a safe space to have that conversation. So sometimes it's parents reaching out to other people too and saying like, hey, can you come in and have this conversation? If it's at school, it could be a counselor, if it's at home, it could be someone like me. It just has to be someone that's a little bit more neutral to get them to where they need to get. And then I see doors open all the time, and a lot of times it's, I'm doing this behavior because I'm trying to make you mad. I'm being oppositional because you keep nagging me. Like if you would just leave me in my space, it'd be fine. Or it's, yeah, I know I messed up. I lied about it. That's what I'm used to. And that's my learned behavior. I'm working on it. But those real raw conversations can actually come out from it. So I would say that that's the biggest way that you can actually correct is if you figure out why it's happening. But sometimes it's fueled on both sides. And so when you can figure out a common ground and what's going on, maybe it's how parents are reacting and they're not meaning to, but a child's taking a certain way, or maybe the child is literally just lying. I have a client like that right now that we're working on it, but literally we're chipping away at the same goal every week. And it can be something as simple as like missing assignments, and it drives parents crazy. Like we talked about before, that ding goes off, but parents have to understand that it's going off for the kids too, especially when they have access to their devices all day now. That ding gives them a stress response pretty fast. So I think it's out of sight, out of mind because they're not in the same place during the day. But parents also have to realize that that's raising anxiety a lot of times for the kids too. And it's not that they want to do poorly. They don't. They just might not know how to get to do, the successful parts that they need to get to. So.
Well, and I think, Lauren, different kids learn differently, right? Some are visual learners, some are auditory. If you have a child that's a visual learner, and we touched on this in the last episode, but no two children are the same. So, a parent might have one child and the child, does great in school. Well, then the second child comes and, they have a harder time maybe sitting still, getting organized, connecting. And so we assume that, the second child's not as good at school. And I think we don't always accommodate for different child's learning styles. So I think if you're a parent, if your child's struggling in school and not doing well, figuring out why, but also looking maybe the approach that is happening is not the best fit. We need to tweak things and advocate for our kids, right?
Right.
What are some general recommendations, Lauren, that you have to help parents, first connect with their children, while helping them be more confident, more motivated?
Yeah, well, I think you hit one right on the head when you said multiple kids in the family, because that's pretty common. Number one, don't compare them because they're not the same kids. And that's really hard for them to consistently hear. And I don't think parents do it all the time consciously, but I think it does come through a lot and impact kids negatively sometimes. So that's the first thing, like treat your kids differently because they are different. And you want them to be different people and successful when they grow up. You don't want the same cookie cutter kids. So, celebrate the glows that they have and figure out those opportunities are and help them with a routine and be consistent in it. Don't set it and then be like, yeah, we did it 2 weeks ago, but we never touched it again. They don't want that. They might not tell you. They might be mad about it at first, and that's fine. We say all the time, like, it's not your job always to make them happy. So give them the routine and be consistent about it. Help them through it. Have clear expectations. They're not going to remember them the first, third, fifth time, but you're going to have to repeat them so that they can get it ingrained in them. And that's totally fine too. It's about delivery on that also and how you say it, like, hey, we talked about this, just wanted to remind you instead of yelling at them about it. And then, work on that effective communication piece too, because there's so much that goes into communication and sometimes it's not words. And you have to pay attention to everything and what the body language is telling you and how you ask questions, keep them open-ended. So it's not like Was today good or bad? Bad. Or how was today? Fine. You have to find a way to actually get information out of your kids without them knowing you're doing it. I always used to say that, in the classroom, like I trick them into learning because I do it all the time. And it's not because I'm trying to be deceiving or anything. Like I'm not, but it works. So you care. So think about how you present yourself to them as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that.
One of the things I work with parents on is what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Can you give us some examples of that okay, these are things maybe we really should avoid. And what are some replacement? Don't nag. What could be a replacement? Because they're trying to remind the child, right, to get something accomplished, whatever it may be. What would you say is a replacement behavior? And can you give us some of those?
Yeah. I mean, we can start with the nagging thing since we've been talking about it. I think the biggest thing for that is a visual schedule, because normally if it's nagging, it's about a chore or homework or something that they didn't do typically. So I think if it's clearly somewhere visual, posted on a refrigerator, on a wall, in the bathroom, I actually have really good luck with clients when they put things in the bathroom underneath the light switch, because they have to look at it, of like, these are the expectations and here's the consequence or rewards. You don't have to nag. It's fine to do gentle reminders in a helpful way. But then honestly, at the end of the day, if they don't do the expectation, then have a clear-cut consequence for it. And then that's it. It could be privilege removal. It works wonders because they all want to be on devices and their phones. So if it's something that's really bad, like take it, or they're not sleeping because they're up all night because they've got their phone in their hand. Take it and see, and reminding kids that it's in their control, because you don't want it to always be like, I'm going to take this thing, I'm going to do this negative thing. It doesn't ever have to get to that point, honestly. But I think it's about delivery again on that, and not power struggling like we talked about. If you can avoid the power struggle, do it 100% of the time, because it's like we said before, no one's going to come out a winner after that. And the other thing I'm really seeing lately is parents talking about their kids while their kids are in the same room as them, but not talking to them, which has been very interesting because I'm like, they are right here. They're sitting at the table. So let's have the open conversation with the child. And it's hard for parents sometimes, but I would avoid talking about them. And honestly, they can hear you on the phone if you're on the phone with your friends, like even if you're closed in your room. I mean, there's multiple times where I'm at houses and I can hear it happening and I'm there and I'm like, we got to work on this piece of it, So, I mean, just have it be open and talk to them and say, this is how I'm feeling, and this is maybe a frustration point. Like, how are you feeling about it? And how can we help you? This is your goal. So how can we get to it? And what do we have to change? There's a lot of times we do behavior contracts or just even family contracts. And sometimes kids just say, I really want to spend more time with my family. That would help me, just have a better rapport. So I think there's things that you can tap into that you might not necessarily think are things that would get you to an end goal, but they really do.
Well, and the other thing I know we've talked about is, the first thing that you say to your child after school, don't have it be, did you do your homework, or how'd you do on the test, or, have a couple minutes of dialogue. How are you? Don't make every interchange about something that they need to get done, because it really does just put stress. I mean, if you're at work and your boss, every time they see you, is kind of nagging you, you're going to avoid seeing them.
Right.
And sometimes kids become dysregulated because they know then parents back off and they don't have to get their homework done. Right. So there's different reasons why we see it. Any suggestions for parents around, dysregulation when it has to do with homework or work completion?
Yeah. Sometimes it's honestly as simple as a change of environment. I have seen kids act many different ways in their own homes versus at a Starbucks or at the library or just out of something or out of their room. If they're a kid that isolates, get them out of that room and put them in a common space. That seems to help regulate automatically for some reason. And then they just have to feel like they have their footing so they know where to start. So a lot of times it's just having a plan and then doing a meaningful check-in with them, not hovering. You don't have to be a helicopter parent, but be around. If you have them at the dining room table, like be in the kitchen where you can see them if your house is set up that way. Enough that if they are struggling, they can feel your presence, but not so much that they're frustrated because you're hovering over them. But you just have to have consistency with it too. And movement breaks are huge also. And kids don't realize that in themselves. I mean, I work with all ages, as you know, and they just, a lot of times I'm like, get up and move. Like, let's do jumping jack, or literally just go walk to the door and come back to me. And it resets them. But they have a very hard time figuring out that that's what they need. It's not only the self-soothing piece of it, but it's also just, I need stimulation right now. And I'm not telling myself I need that right now. And that's where they need parents to step in and be like, hey, why don't you take a break? And it can be like that turns into a positive thing versus, is your assignment done yet? They don't need those check-ins. They just need the the like love check-ins of, hey, I think this is going to be good for you. And we have this plan and let's get to the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And I think staying calm is just always key, right? Even when you don't feel calm. And, I think we can catastrophize. Our child's not going to be successful. It's terrible. It's awful. They'll never amount to anything. And really, it's also sometimes putting in perspective that it's just where they are right now.
Yep.
No judgment. It's just where the child's at. And how do we help them through small steps, kind of get out of that?
Right.
Yeah. And I think for parents, that's because that goes back to how they picture it in their head and how their children are going to be. Because I have a family I work with that's the exact same way. And again, it's parents that have really good intentions, but I would say look at your child and figure out where their limitations are, because they're going to have a breaking point. And if you want them to do well in school, they can't do well at everything. They have to have time to do the things and do the expectations you're asking from them.
Yes. A great conversation. Thank you, Lauren.
And the last final thought is, as parents, if we're not looking confident in our children, our kids aren't going to be confident, right? So sometimes we even have to fake it, but we have to be confident that they're going to be resilient and be able to kind of overcome some of this stuff and thrive in school. And I think that's where sometimes the gap is.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but I appreciate the conversation. Like Robin said, I know Robin's got some questions to ask you.
Yeah, I know you know them from last time, but we'll repeat. Remember, you do not have to answer all three. You can do 1, 2, or you do all three if you want. Number 1, tell us one of your funny parenting stories. So when you were a child, something your parents did. Number 2, what TV, family, or movie would you want to be a part of and why? And number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you?
I'm going to go back to the funny parenting stories, mostly because I was talking to my mom. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to Jackie and Robin. I need another story because last time I did the Ninja Turtle one, which those are the ones that stuck out in my head. But then we were talking about just like parent involvement today, actually. It sparked a conversation. And my mom's like, we were just around, but like your dad used to do a lot of fun things. But what we were talking about is how to be involved in like school activities and sports. And she reminded me that when I was in high school, I was on the Palms team and we went to state. My dad took it upon himself to be the security guard for the team. So he dressed in the colors of the school and like stood with his arms in front of him and literally stood by us the whole time, which people were like, what is going on? But to high schoolers, we were like, this is awesome, But my dad that's the same guy that came to the ice cream social in his like pink and green and blue striped shirt when we were in elementary school to scoop the ice cream. And then I think it bled off to my mom because I remember in elementary school, there was like a nursery rhyme unit or something, and she would dress us up like the characters. So she literally sewed together a Jack and Jill costume for me. So I was half boy, half girl. She like sewed me into it. I went, and then my poor brother seems to get the brunt end out of everything because I think by the time he came, because he's younger than me, she had even more ideas. And he was Johnny Appleseed. And she literally found like my pink dance tights and jazz shoes and put them on him because she found some picture on the internet of what Johnny Appleseed should look like and put a pot upside down on his head and literally dressed him in my ballet clothes. And out the door he went. And I'm like, this poor kid, but it's about parent involvement though. And at the time we were like, this is great, but it's funny looking back. I mean, we giggled today because I was like, I wish you could find pictures of those things because I am sure my brother was the talk of whatever age group that was in the classroom. But it's fun, but they were just around and we knew it. And that's kind of the definition to me of like successful parenting too, is how do you make that successful connection and feel like it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to fail, but then teach the resiliency on the back end to bounce back,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you, listeners.
Hopefully you get some rest, Robin. Have a great night. And I will see you soon. And I will see you soon, Lauren, too, I'm sure. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. And make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.